Hello, good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank Suzanne Rodrigo Villar for the opportunity to participate in this panel with such great contributions to the healthcare system. And this is an increasingly important event which has been taken on an extremely important position in the healthcare ecosystem. I have the honor to moderate this panel. I am Bruno Zawadzki, an infectologist, and I have the opportunity to be with two extremely skilled professionals with me, who also happen to be my friends. One of them is Dr. Marcelo Dibo, a doctor and also a nurse, and an executive director at the Badim hospital. The other professional who's with us in this panel is Dr. Eduardo Rocha. He's also a nephrologist and a professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, an entrepreneur, and it will be a great opportunity and also a pleasure to be with them and sharing this panel with them. We have an increasingly greater demand for professionals that have skills in the healthcare industry. And it's not by chance that professionals that really stand out in the healthcare industry, they have a series of well-developed skills, such as cognitive skills, techniques, both integrative and contextual, interpersonal relations, effective relationships, and mental habits, and the effect-related competencies and the mental competencies are even more important in this period, which is thankfully coming to an end, the pandemic that we went through. Continued education is fundamental in the development of these competencies. We know that over the course of the training of these healthcare professionals, it's not always possible to develop all of these competencies. And more than that, these competencies were only really well defined at the end of the 2000s when the healthcare courses defined which competencies should be developed by healthcare professionals. And that is being constantly updated since this is a dynamic market. After this short introduction, and without further ado, I want to ask a first question to Marcelo and ask him to tell us, and that is important because Marcelo, he became a very prominent professional as a nurse, and then only did he become a doctor, and that's important to highlight. So I would like for him to explain which competencies he had to develop and reinforce over the course of his career before he became such a prominent professional. Thank you. I want to thank Bruno and the organizing committee. I also want to say that it is a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to be with Eduardo Costa, whom I worked with a long time ago. So I'm really flattered to be here sharing this panel with you. My background is quite eclectic, so to speak. I started way back in the past, no need to mention the year, as a nurse, and very proud to be a nurse. I worked for a well-renowned company that also helped me achieve visibility in the market, and I had the opportunity to work with the owner of that company, who was an excellent entrepreneur. And the entire group that worked at the company was like that. And this led me to develop competencies that, as Bruno said, we aren't prepared for at university, especially because we're talking about countless competencies and we tend to have a more um, segmented perspective, not really a holistic. And I think that the pandemic worsened the situation because people continued with their studies, uh, be they physicians, nurses, therapists, and of course, the education migrated to an online setting, which is a concerning aspect of the current education. People did not have the opportunity to go to labs and uh, other important training settings. So I had several opportunities before I had this opportunity, and I would say that actually you have a hard path to tread, and you have to look for competencies within yourself. I think that when it comes to your skills, you have to find your skills with the company you work for, and also within yourself. But I think that the biggest complexity is that the world is extremely diverse and complex versus the transformations of technology. So I think that this combination will require the development of these capabilities. So new requirements and needs, and being able to cater to these different demands is essential. Finding out what competencies you have, what you need to have, which competencies that the company needs you to have is extremely important. But I think, Bruno, that most importantly, these competencies should exist for us to, well, more than to break a paradigm, we have to um, overcome this era. It's an era of transformation that's extremely dynamic. It's in constant transformation, and the type of work that we do is also getting transformed. So we cannot list only one single transformation. We have to be to keep our eyes open to identify these characteristics. If you ask me to list them or some of them, you mentioned a few competencies, but I think that they include technical competencies, which are the skills that you have to have in your professional role, and the essential skills or the behavioral ones, which are extremely important these days. So, a few things that come to mind that were really fundamental for me are, for one, to develop a critical thinking that's extremely important. Um, Being able to uh, think, criticize, and uh, being able to develop yourself in within the system. There's another competency that was also instrumental for me, which is the capacity to negotiate. If you want to take on an important position inside a company, you have to be able to negotiate. That was truly fundamental for me. Negotiating with partners, negotiating with the operator, negotiating with your peers. That was extremely important. And today, with this era of agility that we're now experiencing, we have a competency that we have to develop, which is to be agile in our decision-making process. This sense of urgency, that's extremely important. And for that, you have to have a holistic perspective. And these are abilities and skills that you have to acquire over time. And with this modern era and this these ephemeris things that we see in the world, because things that used to be right in the past are probably no longer considered right, or may not be considered right anymore. So, for instance, you can no longer talk about communication as simply speaking. That has taken on a much wider perspective. You have to take social media into account. So it's not only about speaking when it comes to communicating. So not having a competency within a system, not having the skill to deal with costs, well, that's unimaginable. Companies are having to reinvent themselves when it comes to costs. So you must have people with these skills in your group. And it's not the same as it was in the past, that if you do not perform a certain task, that you're incompetent. And that's not the case. You're competent enough to perform other tasks, and that's what you have to find in a company, the competencies of an individual, so that they can deliver the best performance in the shortest period of time at the lowest possible costs. So when it comes to competencies, they include being agile in your decision-making process, being entrepreneurial. You have to be able to become an entrepreneur inside your own company at the workplace, and that's very important. Extended communication, the power of negotiation. You have to have that switched on at all times, every day, with your patients, with your assistant physician, with your collaborator, with your peers, with your shareholders, with your directors. And again, all that is essential in a systemic process. And going back to your original question, I think this sense of criticism was very important for me to be where I am. And this holistic perspective, that's why I used to say that my professional background is somewhat different, because I came from a nursing background, and then I went to law school and an MBA. I went to the Getulio Vargas Foundation, and then to medical school, and all of that with the holistic perspective of where I wanted to be. So I developed the skills I didn't have in order for me to reach my goals. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's it. Thank you, Marcelo. It's really a pleasure to hear you speak. I had the opportunity to learn a lot from what you mentioned about these competencies. I had the opportunity to work with you as my director for a certain period, and I also had the opportunity to be your professor at medical school. See that I was his director and he was my professor. So who's gonna punish who? Yeah, that was really nice. But Edu, you're a professor at a renowned school, which is the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and the medical school. And you graduated a long time ago. You're an experienced professional, and you certainly had to develop lots of these competencies and learn others. So today, I would like you to talk about this entire process. But if you had to teach your students which competencies they have to learn, which ones would you teach? I am sure that you already do that with your students, but which competencies would you say that they have to develop so that in the future they're able to take on a prominent role?
Bruno, thank you. It is a pleasure to be here among friends. You are an amazing nephrologist from a new generation. I think we are 20 years of age apart. You are probably around 40 and I'm almost 60. And Marcelo, I admire him greatly. And I admire Marcelo because of his career path. You know, if all physicians could have this experience, you know, of caring for people through nursing, nursing has a lot to teach us. And I think that we sometimes are arrogant regarding nurses, and this cannot be justified. I think we are improving, but there's still a long way to go. And as he said, he has connections in law and gastronomy, hospital management, people management, process management. This is such a contemporary career. I'd like to take this opportunity to be here. You know, I'd like to thank Manuela, Flavia, and everyone from the FIS initiative. And you know, you were very good at bringing people together. Speaking about today's subject specifically, of course, we are living through an age of transformation. And through this age of transformation, people who are more open, who have had contact with different areas, they have an edge, I would say, an advantage. I graduated in 1986. It was before the internet, before Facebook, before cell phones. That was quite a while ago. I've graduated 35 years ago. Throughout these decades, as you said, Bruno, I went to a traditional university, which was founded over 200 years ago. So it's a traditional university that faces the challenge of updating itself. And it's not just the institution that has to be updated, people as well. And it's really important that we are all aware of changes. And I like to make some comparisons or analogies. In this transformation, I think that the health area is lagging behind. You know, the field of economy, for instance, is moving faster than us. Some Nobel Prizes in economy were given recently for behavioral economy area. There are many authors who write about behavioral economy, and these authors show us that human beings do not make decisions in a cognitive manner. So the traditional cognitive way of teaching medicine based on, you know, financial reasoning, when people compare prices, this is not considered anymore, you know, because human behavior is much more complex. Now we know, and this applies to every area. So that applies to health as well. We've lost, quote unquote, some time teaching medicine based only in memory and cognition. Oftentimes, we learn a lot of information and we memorize a list of drugs or antibiotics, and we don't even need this. Whereas the best student was not necessarily the one with the best memory. But although we've left this behind, we still don't have a syllabus that allows other competences to be developed. In my experience, I've had the luck to develop extracurricular areas and combine that to traditional areas. So I did a residence, a master's, a PhD. I had the opportunity to go to Harvard, to Paris, and all of these experiences gave me a great foundation. But I tell my students, this is not enough, which is good, because if we're capable of developing competences in other areas, this is going to be great. I have a passion right now, which is analyzing the transformation between the music industry or the arts industry and bringing that to health. And that's why the Santé FM project was born. But in summary, we need extracurricular activities, other activities, and they shouldn't even be considered extracurricular. Some universities are incorporating playful activities in the syllabus, activities about art, activities about gastronomy. The human being is much more complex than just biology and physiology. I hope I did not speak for too long, but I think we can go on with this conversation in the next minutes. Great, Eduardo. Thank you. You've actually mentioned something that I'd like to piggyback on, moving on to the next subject. If we think about continuous learning and active teaching methodologies and their importance to develop these competences, there's still a lot to be done beyond cognitive competences or or learning specific techniques. We need to broaden our vision. And I think that health professionals, they do need to develop different competences. Currently, we have many initiatives led by some startups and by some educational companies with new methodologies. And this is helping to develop soft skills, for example. We currently have a demand and a higher need to develop this type of skills. And I believe that the connection to do that is training and is ongoing continuous learning. However, in some companies, they still face this as a cost and not as an opportunity or as an investment, an opportunity to develop their professionals and therefore to improve their results. Marcelo, would you like to say something about these initiatives connected to ongoing education, continuous learning? How can we use them to develop these different areas? Yes, of course. As you were speaking, I was nodding here. As you know, I am a believer in education. In the past, we had continuous education, but in the end, it was about nursing. It was more focused on nursing. And today, we've changed that. You are one of the people who were actually leading this change and this work. I'm a fan of this change, of these different matrices. Companies can only react swiftly to changes and to incoming technologies and innovation without having to start from scratch. They can only do that if they are very well structured in their concepts. And these concepts can only be structured if we have ongoing education, a sound program for ongoing education. And even when we do know what is the concept and what the company is about, we have to constantly learn. When we finally understand what the company is about and what it does, this information is not lost. Currently, we have many tools, software, libraries, and they have to be made available for everyone. So a training can never be seen as cost. Quite the opposite. Training is really important to reach results. And I have this mindset of an executive, so we are always talking about results. But maybe there's something that I have learned, which is valuing training, valuing behaviors, different behaviors. I give a lot of training. I like to give training, and I really value these behavioral skills. I think this is something that really sets people apart, as human beings. And that's what's going to create a difference from hospital A to hospital B. And it's not just about hospitals, of course. Education needs to be constant, ongoing, and a joint process. It cannot be segmented. If you're going to talk about a protocol for a specific medical area, you need to look at techniques, behaviors, and we have to look at the doorman of the hospital. That's the first point of contact for patients. So oftentimes we provide training and we forget the doorman. So training is key. And we have so many tools available today. I've used some IBKL tools, and they were a technical upgrade, an important technical upgrade for us. So I'm all for it. I cannot fathom managing an institution without having this fundamental department for education, or this perspective on education. Thank you. Thank you. Eduardo, how can these more traditional universities, as you mentioned, you are from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, which is a centenary institution. How do these institutions look at these new methodologies? How do they try to incorporate this into traditional teaching methods so that we can develop these competences in future professionals for the health market, with the goal of improving their training, their academic background, and also with the goal of making it easier for them to enter the labor market in the health area? We have some people, of course, who are more used to traditional methods. And on the other hand, we have the need for new initiatives, for methodologies, for training. How is this seen within traditional universities? Bruno, I'm going to give you a personal opinion, okay? One of the reasons why we have universities is precisely to foster different opinions and different perspectives, teaching people how to disagree and then reach a consensus. I usually disagree more than I agree. So we can look once again at the transformation that happens in different areas. I'm going to talk about painting, the painting universe. If we look at an artistic movement, Impressionism, for instance, from the late 19th century, there were many artists involved in this movement. Many artists remained more traditional artists. Of course, Impressionism had an impact on how we represent human figures or objects. Before that, painting was seen almost as a portrait. You had to reproduce what you saw. And then we had Monet, Van Gogh, all these Impressionist artists that changed this. But let's talk about Picasso. He had this very traditional background. I saw a painting that he painted. It's a physician by a bedside of a patient who's about to die. That's a very classic Picasso painting. He painted it when he was 15. And when we look at the transformation of his style throughout the next decades into the 20th century, it is amazing to see. So he preserved his traditional classic competences, and he also innovated. Universities, and this is my personal opinion, universities have this ability, or should have. We need to change our syllabus, and it's not easy to change a syllabus. New universities, I would say, even private universities, they have an advantage in that sense because they are swifter, they are more agile. And as Marcelo said, in today's world, today we change at a very fast pace. We have to make mistakes fast and correct them fast. And I think that we are lagging behind somehow. Let me give you a semiology example. I am a semiology professor, and I'm proud of that. So I teach patients how to listen to the heartbeats. And I don't give the traditional lesson. I start by explaining how the drums in a samba group work. What is the difference in sound, the difference in pace? How do all those instruments in a samba group work together in carnival? So we teach, and then I use this metaphor for, heartbeat, for breathing, respiratory system. So I start with an area that's so different from medicine, but I think this is a way of attracting students' attention, engaging them, and maybe even inviting them to study music as well. Oftentimes you treat patients who are into jazz, who are into samba. Of course, we don't need to be experts in everything, but when we are health professionals, either in the front line or either in management, all of us as health professionals, we benefit a lot from having a broader perspective and different competences. As Marcelo said, all these competences can be very well developed. We don't need to be born with these skills, but these competences can be developed. The talent is there. It's just about training, and I believe that traditional universities have a challenge ahead. Their teaching methods have to be transformed to face market needs. May I comment quickly? Yes, of course. What Eduardo just said is really important. Being swift, agility to make decisions and to adjust to the modern world without hurting the company or without damaging the organizational culture. And I think that private universities have an advantage, maybe, which is the fact that they are swifter, they are faster, and they can maybe bring semiology, and you can create these analogies with sound or music. I'm a fan of these teaching techniques because I think it's much more engagement, and it helps students make sense out of what they're learning, which is really important. Currently, we have on universities that do amazing simulations, and they interact with different professionals. So drama students that simulate serving a patient, for instance, who's not feeling well, and that places students in a situation that's much closer to reality. So this is amazing. Congratulations on this initiative. I'd like to be present in one of your lessons of semiology. Thank you. Of course, you're invited, Marcelo. I wanted to mention that developing this interpersonal relationship and developing a relationship between professionals of different areas, this is really important. Oftentimes, we are not trained and we don't develop these skills in our academic years. And when we finish university, either as nurses or as physicians, and then we tell them, well, now you cross the street and you're going to start working in a hospital together with lots of people. What are the odds of things going wrong? They're high, right? Yes, not everyone's going to walk hand in hand and work in harmony. Yes, exactly. Adding to what you said, you use the word harmony. Oftentimes I suggest my students to join join a music band or a musical group or to study music. One of the ways that we have to develop interpersonal relationships, people think they're just learning music when they do that. That's the lesser important part. What really matters is to be together with other people, playing together. And that helps the most competent to bring the less competent upwards. So we level different levels. We bring together, we balance different levels of competence. When we go into the real world, of course, we will face challenges. And I've been playing at Monobloco, a band in Rio de Janeiro, for 17 years. And in Monobloco, it doesn't matter if you were a good player or a bad player. Oftentimes, we have great musicians who come in and they know a lot, but that doesn't matter. If you know a lot, fine, just teach the others. But, more important than being a great player is being able to play together. That is an example, and it's a skill that is useful for any group of people, for a society and for a family. Yes, because you help the other people to get better, to improve. Yes, and you are proud to share what you've learned. And if you don't want to share your learning, maybe you were in the wrong place. Yes, you're right. Exactly. Wow, what an amazing exchange of experiences. Unfortunately, our time is almost up, the time for this panel. I hope that you really enjoyed. And I would like to ask you to make your final remarks. We have a couple of minutes before we finalize. So Marcelo, you go first. Well, as a final message, I believe we should think about our personal skills, understanding our own limits. I think this is also important. What are our limits? We are not born with all of our skills, but we can develop different skills, whether they're technical, and technical abilities are easier to learn. But I would say most importantly, behavioral techniques and skills. And if I do it, anyone can do it. We all should think this way. Everything we've said this morning, all these skills, they have a common goal, which is serving patients. And everyone can develop them. So let's develop them, let's have the initiative. This is going to be really important for us to reach whatever we want to reach as our goals in life. Thank you. Eduardo, you have the floor now. Well, once again, I wanted to thank for the opportunity of being here, part of this panel. And I'm surrounded by two colleagues and friends that put to practice everything we've said today. Bruno is the moderator. He didn't speak too much, but he's a highly qualified medical professional. He's a highly qualified manager, and I know that he has sports skills. And Marcelo, I really admire your personal career, your path. It is really important that we tell our stories because, they can be inspiring. We are in a generation now that has easy access to so many things, which make things harder. It's very hard to look at a professional and say, I wanted to be like him, I wanted to be like her, and I wanted to be like you. I can say that. So I thank you once again. I thank the FIS initiative. Congratulations. This week, we are looking and listening to a lot of inspiring people. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. You are inspiring yourself, Eduardo. Rest assured of that. Bruno was my student. And today we are all students and professors. Yes, you're right. We are all students and professors. I was Eduardo's student as well after I graduated, and I worked with him as a nephrologist. I learned a lot from him. Well, and now you are the professor. That's the world we live in today. We all have something to learn, and we all have something to teach. There's no hierarchy. It's about who we are, I would say. It's about who we are. That's what really matters. Thank you all. Thank you both very much. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you all very much.